Chronicle Whispers, The Cold War, a silent battle of superpowers. The ice-cold beginning. It wasn't a war fought with bullets or bombs, but with fear, secrets, and silence. For over 4 decades, 2 superpowers stood at the brink of annihilation, locked in a battle not for land, but for ideology, influence, and the future of the world. This was the Cold War. From the ashes of World War II rose 2 global titans, the United States and the Soviet Union, each wielding a vision for the world's future. The war may have ended in 1945, but a new, far colder conflict had only just begun. Chapter 1. The Origins of Tension. In the aftermath of the Second World War, Europe lay in ruins. The Allied forces had emerged victorious, but the unity forged in battle quickly dissolved. The United States, championing capitalism and democracy, found itself at odds with the Soviet Union, which sought to spread communism across the globe. The first seeds of discord were sown at the Yalta Conference in February 1945. Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin gathered to decide the fate of a fractured Europe. But behind the handshakes and smiles lurked a simmering distrust. Stalin's grip tightened on Eastern Europe, establishing communist regimes while the West watched with growing unease. By 1946, Winston Churchill famously declared, "An iron curtain has descended across the continent. The Cold War had begun." Chapter 2. Early flashpoints. The Berlin Crisis and Korean War. Berlin became the first battleground of this silent war. In 1948, Stalin blockaded West Berlin, cutting off food and supplies to over 2 million people. The United States and its allies responded with an unprecedented operation, the Berlin Airlift, flying over 277,000 flights, delivering food, fuel, and hope. For nearly a year, the skies above Berlin buzzed with planes, a symbol of Western resolve against Soviet aggression. Finally, in May 1949, Stalin lifted the blockade, but the message was clear: the world was divided. The conflict soon spread beyond Europe. In 1950, the Korean peninsula erupted in war. North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and China, invaded the South. The United States, under the banner of the United Nations, intervened. The war ended in a tense stalemate in 1953, but the division of Korea into North and South remains one of the Cold War's most enduring legacies. Chapter 3. On the Brink. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Perhaps the most perilous moment of the Cold War came in October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. American spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles stationed in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. coast. For 13 days, the world held its breath. President John F. Kennedy demanded their removal. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev refused. The globe teetered on the edge of nuclear war. Ultimately, a tense negotiation ensued. The Soviets agreed to withdraw their missiles in exchange for a secret American pledge to remove nuclear warheads from Turkey. Disaster was averted, but the crisis revealed how close the world had come to annihilation. Chapter 4. Proxy Wars and the Battle for Influence. The Cold War was not confined to words and threats. It played out through proxy wars, conflicts, in which both superpowers supported opposing sides without direct confrontation. The Vietnam War became a bitter symbol of this struggle. The United States, aiming to contain communism, backed South Vietnam. The Soviet Union and China supported the North. It was a brutal, costly war, with over 3 million lives lost. Beyond the battlefield, the space race took the Cold War into the cosmos. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. The US responded by landing a man on the moon in 1969, a victory not just for science, but for ideological supremacy. Chapter 5. The Fall of the Wall, the Cold. War's End. By the 1980s, cracks had begun to form in the Soviet Union's foundation. Economic stagnation, internal dissent, and an escalating arms race pushed the USSR to the brink. In 1989, a defining moment arrived. The Berlin Wall, the concrete symbol of division, crumbled. East and West Berliners met at last, embracing not just each other, but the hope of unity. 2 years later, in December 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved. The Cold War was over, but its impact would echo for generations to come. Conclusion. The Cold War's legacy. Though the cold. War ended in silence, its shadows still linger. The alliances, tensions, and rivalries forged during those 45 years continue to shape modern geopolitics. From NATO to nuclear arms treaties, the world remains a delicate balance of power. History, after all, is never truly silent. It whispers, waiting for those who choose to listen. Thank you for joining us on Chronicle Whispers.